So you might recall this project. This is the rustic outdoor table, and it looks even more rustic than it did on day one. I have to say I neglected the finish on this. I think we just applied like a teak oil product and it hasn't held up well, and it really needed to be applied at least yearly, but I didn't do that. You know, we had another kid and hey, I got a little helper today. I did actually get a chance to refinish the benches. Those held up much, much better and probably just need a new top coat at this point, but the key lesson here, outdoor finishes always require additional maintenance. It's just the way it is. It's a way of life with outdoor furniture. So we will do a little rehab on this one. It doesn't take much to remove the gray top layer and expose fresh wood fibers. Western red cedar grays really nicely over time, so if you're into that weathered look, you might not want to sand a surface like I'm doing here. To fill all the cracks and checks, I'm using West Systems Epoxy. Unlike regular 5-minute epoxy, this stuff is loose enough to pour into the small holes and cracks and it just soaks it right up. I could then use a putty knife to spread the epoxy and push it further into the cracks. Though I didn't initially intend on it, it quickly became evident that I'd get best results by simply coating the entire surface. Then I could just go back with an irrigation syringe and force epoxy into the deepest cracks. The ends of the breadboards were in really bad shape, so once the top surface was dry, I just tilted the table on its side and used some blue tape to hold back the epoxy and let the end grain soak up all it wanted. For the benches, I decided to completely remove the previous finish. The wood under there was in much better shape than the table. Once the epoxy was dry, I sanded it smooth with 80 grit paper. As you can see, even the base required some epoxy fills here and there. At this point, it was pretty fun posting pictures online and watching people freak out about how I ruined this table, but as you can see, after some diligent sanding, the top starts to look really nice. Now I can sand up to 180 grit and get ready for the 1-2 punch finish, epoxy sealer followed by marine varnish. I'm trying a new to me epoxy sealer product called Total Boat Epoxy. Unlike similar sealers such as CPES, this stuff has minimal odor and 0 VOCs. Mixing is simple, just use the ratio markings on the mixing cup and apply liberally to the surface. For better absorption, you can dilute with acetone. The product applies easily enough, but it didn't seem to soak into the fibers as readily as CPES, and it also took a very long time to cure, like a week. Eventually, I was able to lightly sand the surface with 180 grit in preparation for the varnish. My varnish of choice is Epiphanes. This stuff is super thick, so I like to dilute it with mineral spirits by about 50% for the first couple of coats, and the last few coats I usually go down to 25%. You can apply this varnish like any other oil-based varnish. I like using foam brushes or natural bristle brushes. By the way, I should mention that none of these products are inexpensive. These are marine quality finishes, and they're made to survive some pretty harsh conditions. That's a good investment for someone who really doesn't want to refinish furniture every year. The tabletop was the biggest pain in the butt, primarily because I didn't want to bring the table into the shop. So my finishing schedule was subject to the weather. And yes, this table did get rained on a couple of times before I wised up and covered it with a tarp. After each coat of varnish, I sand the surface with 220 grit. Towards the end, I move up to 320 grit. I apply a full 5 coats of gloss varnish to all parts of the project. At the rate of 1 coat a day, and in some cases only being able to apply finish to one side at a time, you could see how a project like this might take weeks. The regular Epiphanes product is high gloss. I'm not really a fan of high gloss, so I'm doing 2 more coats of Epiphanes matte wood finish. Because I like to make things confusing, I pour the finish and dilute it inside an empty can of the gloss product. Now check out how well this stuff works. I apply a nice even coat, and then after it dries, the surface is just dead flat. I give the surface a quick hand sanding with 320, vacuum off the dust, and apply a second coat of matte, which is the final coat of finish. All right, so was this a lot of work? Yes, it was. It was a giant pain in my butt. It took a very long time, dodging weather, and just the sheer number of coats of an oil-based finish like this, it just takes a long time. But in the end, it's totally worth it because now it's a very easy to clean surface. I have no problem having the family come out here and have dinner on this thing. There's no splinters, and there's sort of a secondary benefit. The fact that I let this guy sit out in the weather for so long means there were a lot of cracks, and all those cracks are now filled with epoxy, and it gives this surface a very unique look, one that would be difficult to replicate if you were trying to create it from fresh wood. So, you know, it's kind of got that sort of earned rustic character that's difficult to replicate. But overall, I like it. It's got like splotchiness everywhere. It is sort of really lives up to that sort of rustic, not so rustic thing that I was going for with the original build. All right, so I would say the lesson learned here is you should probably finish your projects properly the first time so that you don't have to do a big do-over mulligan like this. But if you do, there are ways to salvage a project even when it looks like it's in really, really bad condition. All right, thanks for watching. Well, how about that? Right on cue, it's actually starting to rain, so good thing I got this umbrella in place. But even if I didn't, I think that finish is going to hold up quite nicely.